So I mean, if we want to get super nerdy,
Let's do it. I love super nerdy.
let's do it then. When you touch and feel things, you've got different receptors that run through your spinal column. So there's this fancy part of your spinal cord called your dorsal column medial lemniscus. And in there, what happens is you have different receptor sites. So you have these alpha beta receptors where when you touch objects and feel them, you're like, oh yeah, I can feel that, sense that. You've got these C fibers, which are slow type pain sensations. So think about like when you stub your toe and you hit it and you're like, oh, it stings eventually. And then you've got these alpha delta fibers, which are rapid fibers. So there's a theory, there's only so much space down that pathway. So the classic thing is there's a reason when you hit something, you rub it. So if you knock your knee and you start rubbing it, it decreases the pain sensation because you're overwhelming those C fibers and alpha delta with your alpha beta fibers. Now, if you have someone who's been in pain for so long, and I'm talking like your fibromyalgia types, these people in chronic pain conditions, we know from functional MRI scans of the brain, their brain has changed that alpha beta pathway into a painful pathway. There's physical changes that take place in the brain and across those pathways. And so it's a case of, although sometimes people might be tougher or people might be more resilient, eventually, if you're living with pain long enough, that pain starts to become rather specific. It starts to become more diffuse. It starts to be a little bit more unreliable in how it presents. And so this is why you need to unpack some of these chronic side issues that come along with just an injury that you might have had 5 years ago, right?
It feels like you've just described, in a lot of ways, the way that people deal with emotional trauma too, right?
100%.
Like if you don't unpack emotional trauma, it will build up and build up and build up and manifest in other ways, right? And it's a bit mad when you think about that, right? That if pain is the same, but pain is tangible and emotions are sort of squirrely in their tangibility, like if the brain reacts in the same way, that's an interesting concept to think about.
Human beings are wacky, man. Like, we know nothing. Like, let's be real. Like, we know nothing. Some of this stuff, I mean, you talked about, you're listening to, you got a glimpse of a podcast when we're talking about the guy spoke to Joe Rogan in the Institute of Psychedelic Research, the way they've been using psychedelic drugs to manage emotional pain and post-traumatic stress. Like, wacky. Like, to think, where we were 15 years ago, where it's absolutely taboo, where this is a legitimate treatment option. We're only just scratching the surface, I think.